Part 3 covers how to set up PowerTeacher Pro to calculate your final grades. It's found under Settings and it's called Traditional Grade Calculations. It's formerly known as Final Grade Setup within Gradebook. Let's take a look at categories quickly. You can't set up your final grades until you've managed your categories properly. So I've gone ahead and set up all my categories for all my classes. So if we take a quick overview of the categories here, you'll see that general information is being used for all my classes. That category I set as collected only. And this allows me to use that category and enter books that I've been assigned students or anything else where I just want to indicate if it was collected or not. If we take a look at conversations, observations, and products, I'm targeting that to my English Language Arts class. Test, assessment, independent project, quiz, I'm only using for my social studies. My exam is being used for 4 classes. Projects, also 4 classes. And then I have my strands in Math 9, so shapes and space, patterns and relations, statistics and probability is only going to be used for Math 9. And then I have my Pre-Cal A 12.0, which has trigonometry and relations and functions. Once all your categories are properly set up and you're not missing any and all your classes are targeted, we can now move on to traditional grade calculations. It's found under Settings, Setup, Traditional Grade Calculations. The first time you get into traditional grade calculations, you'll notice this bubble. It says a grade calculation formula has not been configured for this reporting term, defaulting to total points. That just means you haven't set that reporting term yet. And it's like that for every reporting term for every class. For this example, I'm going to set my Pre-Cal 12.0 class. So you go to Pre-Calculus A 12.0, you click on this little arrow to expand the reporting periods. Pre-Cal is a first semester only class. So the reporting periods are S1, Q1, and Q2. When setting up PowerTeacher, it is very important to always begin with the end in mind. The end in mind is always the final mark. So for a first semester course, the final mark is S1. So you always begin with S1. If it's a second semester course, you would begin with S2. If it was a full year course, you would begin with F1. But for this example, we're going to go to S1. So to set the S1 reporting term, you click on the Actions button here on the right hand side. My first example will be for a teacher who uses category weights and has cumulative marks from September until January. So I will change this to category weights. And if you've set your categories properly, you'll see only categories that are targeted to this class. And the categories I'm using to set up my Pre-Cal 12.0 class is exam, projects, trigonometry, relations and functions. So I need 4 categories. So I only have 1 line here, so I need 4. So I'll click on this line 3 more times. And I'm going to set them all to category weighting. So once I have my 4 categories, then I need to weight them accordingly. So my exam is worth 30%. My projects are worth 20%. Trigonometry section is 25. And relations and pattern is 25. The percent on the right hand side shows you exactly what percentage that category is worth for the overall grade. The reason you have 2 columns is because the weight column does not need to add up to 100. If it doesn't, for this example, if I put 20 here, it will readjust the weights. But I like to work in hundreds, it's easier to understand. Once you have all your 4 categories set, your weights are set, then you click on Save. This will be how the final grade is calculated for the January report card. The Q1 reporting period is the first reporting period. It's the report card in November. So you click on Actions, And we need to set Q1 the exact same way as we set S1, category weights. However, I'm only going to need 3 category weights. I'll explain in a second why. So I want my projects, I want my trigonometry, and I want my patterns and relations. I'm going to set the same weight number as I did in S1. So projects was 20, trigonometry was 25, patterns and relations is 25. I am not going to put in my exam, but I'm going to leave these weights as is. I'm going to let the program readjust the weights accordingly until the exam is written at the end of the semester. You repeat the same steps for Q2. Now that the Q2 reporting period is identical to the Q1, it's not quite the same as S1, because in S1 we have the exam. So on the report card in November, we'll have Q1 will have these 3 categories. The report card in January will have the Q2 mark that does not have the exam, and you'll also have a final column for the final mark for those students. That last example were for teachers that use cumulative grades from September until January and category weights. Let's take a look at a teacher who does term weights. We always start with the end in mind, so we begin with S1. So when you select term weights, you'll see a reporting period, so Q1. So Q1 and Q2 are the 2 reporting periods that make up the report card in January. So we need 2 reporting terms. So a popular setup that I've seen is a teacher will say that Q1 is worth 35%, so the report card mark in January is put aside and 35% of that is taken for the final mark. Then the Q2 reporting period, which runs from November until the end of January, is also worth 35%. So that mark will generate another 35%, so we're missing 30%, which I often see, which is an exam. So we need to add the exam. So we can go category weights, and we can say that my exam category is worth 30. So for the final mark on the report card in January, Q1 is worth 35%, Q2 is worth 35%, and the exam is worth 30. And then you click on Save. Since Q1 and Q2 are separate, you can then go into Q1 and set up your categories as you like. So I can leave them like this, 20, 25, and 25, or you can readjust the categories. Since Q1 is separate from Q2, they don't all have to be the same. You could have categories in Q1 that are not found in Q2. It's a question of preference. So I've set Q1 to category weighting. You can then set your Q2 to category weighting and use the categories that you'd like to. And you click on Save. And then you're done. Your pre-calculus 12-0 class is set up for the year. Note that some teachers use term weights, but they include the exam in Q2. So in this example, you wouldn't need an exam category. You could remove it, and you could say that Q1 is worth 40%, and Q2 is worth 60%. So then you would have a Q1 reporting period that you can set the way you want. Again, these are reporting periods. They're term weights, so they do not need to be identical. That's your Q1. However, in Q2, since you want the exam to be part of Q2, we would need to add another category here. And give our exam 30%. Final grade calculations is a personal preference. Not everyone does it the same. However, PowerTeacher Pro can cater to everyone's needs.